All right, how's everybody doing tonight? Spring break next week. Woo! Well, let's look at the calendar here first. Let me bring it up here. Okay, we are March 5th. Next week, you are off from the 8th through the 15th. And then next Thursday, or actually 2 weeks from this, 2 weeks from tonight, is your study night we talked about last week. That's when you're going to be basically beginning your research paper presentation. Generally have it on week 11 each semester, but this week on week 11 I had something going, so we have it on week 9. So actually you get 2 weeks off from here. But you don't actually get 2 weeks off. The second week you're supposed to be starting to work on your presentation and your research paper and your outline, okay? So let me go over that real quick, what you'll be doing next Thursday or 2 Thursdays from now. I'm going to jump over to week 10, or week 9, I'm sorry. Week 9, there is a podcast for you to watch. Wrong one. Sorry about that. There it is. Week 9 lab is a podcast right here. I'll pull it up on the overhead. I'm not going to watch it right now. You'll watch it that night. Basically, it's just a Prezi slideshow on helping you start your outline for your presentation and what to do from your research paper to your presentation. And so this little tutorial helps you out on that. And also there's a question you have to ask after you've watched it and after you've done your work for that night, which is 2 weeks from tonight. What did you accomplish for research paper presentation? It might be you just got your outline done. That's fine. That's something. That's at least getting a start with your research, is getting that outline done. So watch the final paper and presentation, little Prezi I put together. At least create your outline after you've watched that presentation. So I'll walk you through some helps for you, and then you'll submit what you've done. So again, next week, spring break, week following, you're not coming to class, you're going to work on your research paper presentation. Questions on that? Okay. Yes, question about it. Or stretching out. Okay, there we go. Next thing I want to mention was A++ certification study session on March 7th, 10 to noon, and March 25th, 5:30 to 7:30 in this room. Stephanie will be helping those who want to get CompTIA A+ certification, and you want to help. She's going to help you with the study session. So if you thought about doing it, it'd be a great opportunity, I believe, to take advantage of it. And again, March 7th, 10 to noon, and March 25th, 5:30 to 7:30 in this room. No RSVP, just show up. And she'd like to get a lot of folks to come to do that. So if you're not interested, but you might spread the word on Facebook. Hopefully you're already following us on Facebook. Just share it on your wall, and maybe some other people, other students will take advantage of it. Yes.
Is that 2 separate study sessions?
2 separate study sessions.
So you have to show up to both of them?
Nope, it's 2 separate, totally 2 separate.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not combined at all.
Cool.
Nope. They'll cover topics from 220 and 801 and 220 802 CompTIA A+ certification exams, as well as test taking tips, access to certification practice test, measurup.com, as well as how to sign up for the test at RVC. So the whole encompassing, even if you're not interested in this, I think it'd be cool to go just to find out about CompTIA certification and how to sign up. So probably be well worth your time to do that. Yeah, no charge, totally free. Yeah, she's just offering her time to do it. So fill it out for Stephanie and fill up this class, and she would definitely enjoy it. And thank you for it, and I would too. The other thing is, just want to mention on the website, there's a few fairly new posts that if you haven't had time to look over, The first one, actually, I referred to our building and construction guy here on campus, but I put it on our site anyway because it came to us. It's an internship on assistant building inspector for the city of Belvidere over the summer months, looking for assistant building inspector. I believe they've already got it filled, but it's not concrete yet, so I'm going to keep it up there until I hear otherwise. Lions LLC is still looking for a system admin. This position is full-time. You need to have Red Hat experience, VMware, MySQL, PHP. They have over 250 servers managing throughout the nation. Internship at UTC, aerospace system. And this is for intern candidates who are interested in internship program and are able to work up to 30 hours per week. Let me click on that one because there's some clarification on this one. I don't think I put it in here because I didn't want to confuse, because when they first put this out, it said you needed, oh, here it is. The program is designed for current bachelor's, master's, MBA student in the Rockford area. It just means if you're going towards that, even if you're already in a 2-year now, if you eventually want to finish your bachelor's, master's, or MBA, and you should be currently enrolled, they said that's fine, because I did call to get clarification. I said, well, this is a 2-year college. They said, yeah, that's fine as long as they are in school and want to continue in school. The advantages of internships they have here is you look at robust projects, practical experience, develop leadership functional skills, exposure to executive leadership at UTC businesses, competitive pay internship. In fact, I don't think it's in here, but the pay is going to be around $19.50 per hour, which is awesome for an intern. Like crazy awesome. And so it's still out there. It's multiple internship positions, not just one. And so it's not just like one and it's gone. So anyway, bear yourself to that. This one's still not filled. If you know anybody that's in nursing, any nursing assistant, or if you thought about going into nursing, there you go. I did nurse aides going through college, believe it or not, for 1.5 years. Yeah. So it's a job and paid well. And let's see what else here. Let's go to the My Future tab. I thought there was a couple more I want to mention, still not filled yet. System admin. This one here is maintaining, configuring, optimizing. And it's for bway.org. And they are looking for system-wide multi-user operating system support, hardware and software tools, including installation, configuration, maintenance, and support of systems, responsibility for operating system associated subsystems, identify alternatives for optimizing computer resources responsible may require evening and weekend work in response to needs of the system being supported, which is a usual for system admin. Entree, last I checked with Mike, is still needing the IT salesperson. If you're not interested, but you know somebody it is, refer them to this page so they can email Mike. And Tri Rivers, still needing some help. Network admin, willing to train. We do have one student in process of this right now. Might be getting this job, but still not been filled yet. And says they're willing to train, but they want some, after talking to the student went through the interview already, they are wanting somebody that has some network administrator experience. Not a lot, but a little bit. So, and let's see. That's about it. That's all I want to mention on that. Okay, so I covered that. Covered next week or 2 weeks from tonight. And okay, so next week, spring break. Hopefully you get some time with your family, enjoy it. Don't think about school for a few days at least. I know most of you work, so you'll be working still, but at least you want to come to school, so that'll be cool. Tonight we're going to talk about WAN, wide area networks. Then we're going to do a starting of the take home. You're going to take your lab home with you, and actually it will be due, even though we're not going to be here. I'm going to make it due 2 weeks from tonight. I'm going to make and change that due date right now while I'm thinking of it. So 2 weeks from tonight, the take home you're taking home tonight will be due 2 weeks from tonight instead of being due Sunday. So let me change that right now. And basically, before you leave tonight, you're going to get with one other person and set up a schedule to connect remote into each other's computer at home to do this lab using TeamViewer. Okay, it's a lot of fun. If you've never used TeamViewer, it's kind of fun to use and good experience for you. So let me see here. It's going to be, let's see, March 26th is going to be the due date, which is a Thursday, 2 Thursdays from tonight. Sound good? So you want to do it between now and Sunday, and you want to do it over spring break, but up by Thursday after spring break, 2 weeks from tonight. All right. So I'm leave it on there. We're all in chapter 7 for review questions and quizzes, and let's get started on the discussion here for chapter 7. All right. So we've talked about WAN a little bit as far as topologies go and what refers to any, and I mentioned during the talk with WAN that WAN is basically anything that has in it involved in it the internet. Okay. So you've got your router here, you've got a router here in 2 locations. In between are connecting to or through a WAN connection via an ISP, like say AT&T, Northern Illinois, you name it, different ISPs that are out there. But that's going to be your WAN connection. The cloud is your WAN connection, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. But WAN basically is where networks can connect, 2 local networks can connect remotely from long distances with a WAN connection. And that transmission method depends upon the business needs. They're going to be fast or slow, generally going to be fast, like here on campus. We've got 3 T3 lines that come into our building from southern Illinois from our ISP. We have somebody on campus that writes a grant for it each year. It's about $1 million each year to support it, and the bandwidth that we have in all of our locations. So it can be quite expensive for that transmission speed, for that transmission method. And we'll talk about tonight, there are some point-to-point protocols that's even more expensive, where you have, like, say, a Comcast or an AT&T do a direct line from your building to the other building in town. That can be done as well. Fiber can be done as well. Satellite. So a whole bunch of different methods we'll talk about. But the main common denominator between everything we're talking about is the cloud, is the internet, is the World Wide Web, ISP that we're connecting to do this. So WAN and LAN common properties. There is a client host type thing. All right, it's on the layer 3 of the OSI model and higher. It has packet switching, and basically all it's referring to is that as the same way data flows in your internal network is the same way it's going to flow over the WAN. Okay, granted, you're going to have different IP addresses you're going to hit, but it's the same technology. WAN and LAN differences are layer 1 and 2 methods, like for instance, the media that you're transferring upon. Like here in classroom, what are we using for media between your computers and the switches? What kind of wire are we using? Ethernet, Cat5, right? That's what we're using, right? We have it from these boxes, actually from this box here, under the floor, some fiber going into the IT room. So we have Cat5 and fiber. So that's one of the differences. You will see a lot of times on WAN, you will see, fiber a lot of times will be used on a WAN connection. Could also be coaxial for your cable provider. Could be satellite. Could be cellular. So those are differences as far as media really is going to be a big difference. The wiring on a LAN, it's privately wired, privately owned IPs. It's not something that anybody outside your building can type in and get your IP address at home. You have to be in your LAN to get your IP address at home. You have to be in that environment. It's a local IP address. Whereas the WAN that you're connected to is an external one. It's an external IP address that can be pinged outside of your environment. WAN wiring, public through network service providers, are an example I mentioned already is AT&T, but then you have Verizon and Sprint. Those are big providers as well for network service providers. And that would technically mean your ISP, internet service provider, for your area, for your location, for your business, for your home. A WAN site is individual geographic locations connected by a WAN, and a WAN link is a WAN site to WAN site connection. And so the little nice drawing I made up here, site to site, you have your local, and then your WAN. The connection though to the WAN is both on the router side here and the router side there, as far as the WAN link connection. The initial WAN link connection from outside your router, outside the building. WAN topologies, longer distances, as you can imagine, more users, more traffic, connected to dedicated high-speed links, usually different connectivity devices between here and there, because it's going to be dependent upon the backbone of the network as it's going across the country, as it's going across states, as it's going across borders, things like that, and maybe even transcontinental possibly. So you might have between here and there fiber, Cat5 or coaxial fiber. You know, might have transatlantic fiber possibly. So a whole bunch of different types of connectivity and media. WAN connections do require routers, and when we did the ping lab, when we did the tracer, remember how it hit all the routers throughout the route, right, in the different locations, and it's going to hit them to the server and back. So your WAN connections rely upon routers from where you're at to where you're going for that connection to work. Where the cost comes in is where you want to limit the routers. If you want a direct link to only your companies, that's going to be more expensive. You have to literally do direct line wire runs for your company, and they will do that, but it's very expensive. Just a 5-mile run of fiber, just to give an example, a company I was with, still with, did a fiber run for 5 miles. It was $85,000 just for the cable, not including the labor. Now the labor cost on top of that, which was a week and a half, was over $130,000 just to run 5 miles. That was actually pretty cheap for what they got it for. The only reason it was, the labor is what they got a cut on. Labor should have been around $250,000, $300,000, according to the sales guy that we know. But anyway, it's very expensive. And it was cool. One of the days that they were doing it, I was actually watching them running wire across the Riverside and then over to Alpine. Took about a 30-minute time where they were running that, literally running the fiber onto the cable or onto the telephone poles for our business. That was kind of cool to see that. And but you know, that's all these guys do. You normally don't see it unless you're looking for it, unless you know what's happening. But it happens quite a bit. And we were wanting a direct link to a local business, and that costs money to do that. But normally, and it was for a security reason, but normally you're not going to have to do that. You just rely upon whatever router is just going to hit in your ISP. If it's AT&T, if it's Comcast you're hitting, and then maybe they'll switch somewhere down the road to AT&T's backbone across the nation. Because Comcast is not everywhere, believe it or not. They're almost everywhere, but they're not everywhere. So you might cross, like if you're hitting between here and New York, you probably hit, you're going to hit Comcast in Chicago, then eventually you're going to get, Time Warner. You'll hit them as you near closer to the East Coast. But again, all the routers are going to be the one that it hits. And also it cannot carry non-routable protocols. Non-routable protocols are going to be those in a Class A environment, which are reserved for local area networks. And so like a 10 dot number or whatever like that within an IP range. So here we have differences in LAN and WAN graphically and kind of visually here. You got multiple locations here in a WAN company. And so you got, Houston, Miami, New York, Detroit, San Francisco. Then we switch over to the cloud into a LAN, and you'll notice you could say, pinpoints about the same, but they're just closer in proximity. So you've got, and here in the example would be, you got a file server connected to a router, connected to a switch, and then from the switch, multiple hubs and computers. So in essence, it's the same type of topology, but just longer distances in between. And you're gonna have different media in between along the way. But basically it's proximity and speed that you're dealing with between WAN and LAN. In a WAN environment, they do have a topology called bus. Each site's connected serially to two sites maximum. The network site is dependent upon the other sites to transmit and receive data. There's different locations to one another through point-to-point links. These are best used in smaller organizations require small WAN and dedicated circuits. It's not scalable. Is the example I just mentioned with the company I work for, where they just did a one-to-one connection, not scalable because the building's there. There is no future move for it, but it's for the need that we had, and so it works. And remember, bus is again from one point to one point, and that's it. Here's an example: some buildings downtown Rockford, maybe connected in a bus topology on a one-to-one, and you'll notice the different backbones in between. You got DSL maybe between one building, T1 between one building, T3 between one building for that connection, but all on the same network, all on the same network. So building on the left could log into a server maybe on the right, even though they're different backbones, okay? And the backbones are going to determine upon what speed of data they need for that location. And just by looking at the connections, the T3 one to the Charles Street one is going to have more data being pushed on a constant basis. T1, a little bit less. And then the one with DSL, maybe very few, far between. Maybe just logging into, I don't know, look at a log file or authenticate to get a file to bring it over or something once a day. So not a lot of traffic. Ring is another topology in a WAN. Each site's connected to two other sites. It forms a ring pattern. It connects locations. It does rely upon redundancy, meaning you're going to have duplicate packets for a purpose. It's so data that does fail will be rerouted. The expansion is difficult and expensive because once you set it up, a lot of more hardware involved on making it larger. And so not a lot of expansion on this. The best use on this is connecting a maximum of 5 locations. So here we have, you notice the difference between the first and this one is the bottom one, which finishes the circle of the cycle. But again, so there's no real growth here to happen. Maybe another building gets added, possibly, and that could happen, but it's going to be more cost involved. But again, this one's going to be for to make sure these buildings are on the same network, and you'll notice all of them have separate backbones as well that they're working upon between building to building. Stars in the latest, just like it is in the LAN environment, is this latest topology. You have a single site, central located, separate data routes between all the other 2 sites, for any 2 sites. Advantages, there's a single connection failure point to one location, affects only one location. So if building 1 fails in the ring, it's gone, the whole network's gone. Well, in the star, it's not the case, you'll see in a second. Building 1's just gone, but you still have building 2, 3, 4, and 5 maybe connected. Now, building 1 is a central area, that could be a problem. If it's a central house for that WAN environment, then that could be a problem. So single connection failure affects only one location. Shorter data paths between any 2 sites. Expansion is simple and less costly. Drawback is one I mentioned earlier. Central site failure brings out entire WAN. So here's an example here of that. We have the mothership in the middle there, spidering out to all the locations. And so if the right location fails, it goes down. The other two are fine, okay? If the middle one fails, the other two at the bottom are fine. If the left one fails, the bottom right two are fine. If the middle one fails at the top, the whole thing's down, okay? So that's going to be the central location or the central resource for all the authentication, file servers, things of that nature. But this is the most common today. This one right here is the most common on modern networks that are set up, would be the star. And then mesh is basically incorporating over years of time all the old ones. So from maybe it started with bus years ago in the late 90s, then it morphed into maybe a star. So now it's a bus star network, possibly. You won't see a lot of rings just because they're more expensive to set up. And so buses are still prevalent in older organizations. And as they've added new buildings or new geographic areas, they've added star type topology. So that's what the mesh is basically, is it incorporates everything. And mesh basically travels directly from origin destination. Routers can redirect easily. Fault tolerance, most fault tolerant in the WAN type. Full mesh is where all sites are directly connected one to the other. And the drawback on this is on a full mesh, it's costly, and partial mesh WAN is less costly. So basically it looks like a spider, kind of like the left one is a full mesh. And you'll notice you have not only the ring topology thing going on, but you also have the cross in the middle connecting the buildings one to the other on a full mesh environment. So it's fail safe. If one fails, you got a fail safe to fall back on. That's a full mesh. On partial mesh, you'll notice the one straggler out there is not in the mix there, and if it fails, it's gone. So full mesh and partial mesh are still popular. The full mesh is actually popular in banking systems where they have to have their data. New York Stock Exchange would be an example of full mesh. Tiered is the other type of WAN. The sites are connected in a star and a ring formation and interconnected at different levels. And their interconnection points organized into what's called layers, and they form a hierarchical grouping. They're very flexible. They allow many variations, practicality. They require careful configuration and consideration of where things are going to be, both geographically, how people are going to use the network, is there going to be any further growth? And here's what this one looks like. It actually looks like 3 separate stars, and that's what it is, connected to basically a bus in between the stars. So a little bit more robust, a little bit more costly, but pretty popular. And those 3 entities at the top would actually probably be, well, they are different locations, Madison, Detroit, New York. And so those are the motherships for those regions. And then regionally, they're connected by the T3 lines. PSTN, Public Switch Telephone Network, is just a network of lines. Up till recently, AT&T was the only PSTN around before Comcast came around. Anything you had to do, including Comcast up to 5 years ago, they had to pay AT&T to do in that area and to grow and to add in new lines. A network of lines, carrier equipment, providing telephone service. That's why AT&T was the only one. Ma Bell, you might have heard of before AT&T. Still, believe it or not, well embedded in the U.S. and still very well, a lot of old money and a lot of political pull, much more than Comcast, believe it or not, which is hard to believe. But they kind of stay under the current. But Comcast doesn't do anything without AT&T's approval. And it's just because they've been around so long. All right. So anyway, it's POTS, which is kind of a funny name. Plain old telephone service. Encompasses entire telephone system, originally analog, Today, digital data, computer controlled switching, dial-up connection, had a modem connected to a computer for connecting to that PSTN line. And some of you remember way back maybe when you had modems, you dial up and went on the internet, faxed, all that good stuff. Today it's all done through broadband. And so, but PSTN is still around. There's still DSL quite a bit with using the old analog lines coming into houses for internet connection. And it's going to be around a while. All right, it's going to be not going to be gone anytime soon because it's very expensive to run fiber. It's very expensive to run fiber. As they build new subdivisions and new whatever, they're always running fiber. But old neighborhoods, like we have a lot in Rockford and every city pretty much, they're going to keep analog for a while, because, like, again, very expensive to run fiber. ISDN, you might have heard of this. This started back started for transmitting digital data over PSTN. ISDN, when I first came to Rockford, was about $800 a month per business for a fairly decent bandwidth. And so that was pretty cheap too, by the way, $800 a month back then for internet connection. Gained popularities in the 90s, and it connected WAN connections via voice exchange, data exchange. And you could buy basically two separate data links. You could buy one for data, one for voice. Protocols, same as a LAN. You had your physical protocols, your data link, transport layer. You had your signaling, your framing, your connecting setup, your transmission, termination, flow control, error detection. It relied totally on the backbone of the old POTS network, the old PSTN backbone, analog backbone. And they had dial-up and dedicated connections both. Dial-up relied upon digital transmission. So they were capable, and still are, in some areas, still have it, believe it or not, around the nation, in rural areas. Capability of 2 voice calls, 1 data on a single line. They had what's called channeling in ISDN. B channel was a barrier channel, switching for video and audio up to 64 kilobits per second. D channel was for calling information, like a data channel, 16 or 64 kilobits per second. And they had what you would pay for what's called BRI and PRI, which were basic rate interface and primary rate interface connection. And so over the years in ISDN, when it first started, it began getting different packages you could buy. And when more people started buying it in a business realm, it went from $800 when I first got here in 2000 till 2002. That's whenever they started laying wires for coaxial, and at that time it was Insight. But there were still a lot of businesses still in ISDN. Going on with ISDN, the B channel, again, voice and data. They had what's called bonding, where basically you paid for 2 B channels to be combined into one to duplicate or add to the speed, double the speed, basically, 128 kilobits per second. And last of the slide, just note on the maximum throughput, as the iteration of life cycle came on, it came up to a 1.544 megabits per second, which, if you think about it, up to that point, most folks were used to 56K for dial-up modem, and that was maximum that you had just a few years prior to this. And so it was pretty fast. I mean, for what we had back then, moving to this was pretty fast. And businesses loved it because they could move data much faster, much quicker than what they could prior to that time. So here we have an example of a BRI link. You've got the local phone company, 2 B channels and a D channel. B channel, again, could have audio or video. D channel is dedicated normally just to data. And notice on the right side, it could then be converted into digital to go to a terminal equipment, like a workstation or a phone. And so that was pretty big, a pretty big step. Cisco wasn't around then at that point. IBM, 3Com was a big guys on the block with voice over IP. And they sold a lot of phones, a lot of terminals back then. So here we have more blues are basically just, this is towards the end part, by the way, of the biggest growth of ISDN. The blues just mean more data and voice was involved and a lot faster than what they first started with. Then we come to the big guys, T1, T2, and T3. We even have all the way up to T5 now. But anyway, these are basically walk on a physical layer, single channel into multiples. And the medium on this is telephone wire analog, fiber, and wireless. Rock Valley, we work over mainly fiber, but there are a few spots in between here and Champaign that are old analog for a little bit. And so not very long spots, but mostly fiber that they've had run. Here's an example of some of the throughputs for T1 through T3. I just want to make note of the throughput on the right. So if you had, like, say, T1, which is a second line down, 1.544 megabits per second. That's when they first came out and very popular. But notice as we go all the way down to T5s, 400 megabits per second. And that's static. That's not, there's no, like, you know, Comcast tells you, you're going to have guaranteed 600 down and 500 up, or whatever. You never get it. But this is pretty much guaranteed. You have it. It's static. And so, but what they can do is you can combine them. So like here at the college, you got 3 T3s that we have, and then we're working on T4 and T5 in a couple years, quite a bit more expensive. But where it says number of T1s basically is in order to get the speed of the throughput, you're just combining multiple T1s is all they're doing, combining multiple T1s to get that speed up to where they want it to be. And you just keep adding more T1s in order to get the speed and throughput that you want. T1 worked on, does have 24 voice and data channels. T3, 672 voice and data channels. The T carrier is dependent upon the signal. Like here on campus, we have a 921 number from AT&T in our T1, or I'm sorry, our 3 T3s. And the way it works is when you call into campus, you're still hitting through analog in our building. When you guys do the tour at the end of the campus or end of the semester, I'll show you. There's a side of the wall that you literally see all the analog lines coming in, right? And you might have been in your basement at your house, or you've seen this in a business. They're pretty ugly. Have you ever seen an analog? I mean, those guys that do that, I was like, wow, that's pretty crazy. There's a lot to do one of those patch panels for analog. And then we have the old analog wall of all the phone wires coming in. And then we pay for so many 921 numbers. So we, I don't know how many we have, but let's just say we have 400. Let's say we pay for 400. You pay for every increment, like say for every 50, you pay so much for every 50 more that you pay for. So when analog comes into the building, it's then on the left side of the wall here, it's literally in a room, no wider than, a little bit wider than this screen actually. It's not much wider than that. And on the right side is analog, on the left side is the digital fiber. But what happens is this, here's the analog wall with all the cables here, all the analog wires. Then down below, it comes over here. And then you've got coming out of here, patch panels to convert those analogs into fiber, multiple fiber lines. And then those fiber lines actually go out into the IT room, into what's called Baker's racks. And that's where all of our, used to be 3Com, voice over IP, but now we have Cisco voice over IP. And so basically what these systems are doing is converting the analog lines into digital fiber to where it can come into our phones, which our phones can then be connected to our computers. And today's phones can actually serve both purposes. You can have one Cat5 cable going to a phone, one Cat5 cable from the phone going to the computer, and that's all you need for connectivity. And then you can run software on the computer that basically when somebody calls you, it pops up their name, their number, the last time they called, and that's kind of cool to have that. But you didn't have that with analog, and you do now with voice over IP. Do a lot of companies use that feature in voice over IP? They really don't. I think it's one of the cool uses of voice over IP. I think that companies should use, but they don't. And there is some configuration to it, but I've been at a few companies that have utilized it. In fact, I set it up here on campus in a small area one time. And what we would do is, just for testing purposes, we'd have people call and just to test it, and it would pop up the database, their face, the last time they called, any notes we had about it. So, I think it would be pretty beneficial for especially customer service area. And those that are in customer service, by the way, for a living, definitely have it working in there. But it doesn't, then the 3Com and also in the Cisco phones that's built in, it's just something you have to turn on and configure. And again, it's not an easy configuration. That's probably why most businesses don't do it. There's a lot of kind of hit and missing configurations. But a lot of voice and data on the T3, a lot of throughput. And then the T carrier is dependent again upon the physical layer of that line, whatever it might be coming through. Generally going to be at this level, T3 probably mostly fiber. Here's some uses of T's. T1, connecting branch offices together, connecting carrier offices, connecting telephone companies, ISPs. T3 use, data intensive like we are, very data intensive. Educational folks are, so libraries are going to have them, governmental facilities are going to have them. T3 provides 28 times more throughput, and notice they put expensive, than T1s. T1 cost varies by region, and you do have what you can pay for like fractional T1, where multiple businesses will pay for a fractional use and not have to pay as much individually. Connectivity requires connectivity hardware on all the service ends. They have certain hardwares for it on the customer side. The hardware is dependent upon the carrier, by the way. So if it's AT&T, they have certain hardware. If it's let's say Comcast, certain hardware, Verizon, certain hardware, and they can be either purchase or lease. It's the same way as you guys do at home with your cable modem, right? Or you can lease it or you can buy it, right? Cannot be used with other WAN transmission methods. It's a proprietary method for that unique carrier, just like Comcast has a proprietary Motorola modems that are for Comcast. Yes.
You can actually purchase, as far as like, if you have the dual service for your phone, you can purchase.
Oh, you can purchase.
Those, yeah, they have the same model. They
yep.
It's I actually went to a person with the Motorola ones.
Yep. That's the most popular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Aris ones.
I've heard of that one.
Yeah. It's similar features.
Yep.
Yeah, but they're purchasable. They're
you can definitely purchase them.
And they do pay for themselves in well, what's it like? Probably a year, considering Comcast just bumped up their modem rental fees to $10 a month.
The last time I had Comcast, which was 4 years ago, I paid for mine. Yeah, I've always paid for it, so I brought it with me wherever I went. So yeah.
I was wondering, I had a friend who worked for a while at the old was it MCO when it was the MCI.
Right. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And
right off of Perryville.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she was talking about R2 lines.
Okay.
Just for the phone company.
Right.
There.
Yeah.
That those were almost exponentially greater than the T lines.
Okay.
It was like, what the T line is to a DSL,
right.
R line was to a at the time T3, I think was the highest.
Yeah, and all these companies, especially those like NCO, are going to have a unique proprietary system because they can afford it too, to pay for it. It's actually cheaper for them to do that because they're not having to pay the monthly increases that all these other companies charge for whatever every month. So I'm glad you guys mentioned that. T carriers do require different media, as you can imagine, and most of that media is going to be fiber. But then there are some T carrier providers that actually have their own unique wiring too that they use, and it's for a reason, so nobody else can basically duplicate what they're doing. Can hack into it and duplicate it. A company can duplicate this or whatever, or tap into it or whatever. So it's much harder to do anyway. Wiring can include, kind of like we did in here with the plain telephone wire, can include untwisted pair, copper wiring, single twisted pair, STP, preferred for clean connection. And basically you have coaxial, fiber wave, and fiber optic. You're familiar with coaxial, fiber optic you've heard of as well. Microwave sounds just like what it is. It's like we have some microwave dishes out here, and basically be point to point, location to location. A lot of downtown areas will have microwaves pointed between building and building for communication, for T's. T1s use STP required repeater every 6,000 feet. And generally in between those is going to be fiber runs. And then you can have what's called multiple T1s or T3s that generally are going to need fiber optic cabling as well. This is just what's called an RJ48 for these type of runs. They have the stripe cables. They have these solid cables, just like when we did the labs in here. 8 wires and just a different connector, an RJ48 connector, so RJ45. Same deal with the crossover. You're familiar with this one? Remember, you saw this one when we did the RJ45s, and 2 of the wires were switched to serve as a crossover. And then T carrier connectivity. On this slide, all I need you to know is what's called a channel service unit, and then unit service unit, data service unit. Basically, all these are 2 separate devices that combined into single standalone devices for connectivity points on both ends. CSU. DSU converts the T-frames into LAN interpretable data as it's coming into the building. They have what's called smart jacks that are hot pluggable because they sometimes fail. And they are either inside or outside the building, usually right inside the building or located on the outside of the building, either one. And they have what's called a monitoring port for the ISP or wherever they're paying to monitor that. Kind of like an example, be at home use. You can call Comcast and they can monitor your device from their location and tell you kind of what to do. And you're like, how do they do that? They can reboot it. They can do a whole bunch of stuff with it because they have a monitoring port directly to that. So here's basically in the middle, the internet is a T carrier, whatever it might be, the backbone might be. We'll say it's fiber or whatever. Then we got a smart jack, we'll say, on the building. And then those boxes there that are the multiplexers are provided by and paid for and either leased or bought by the company to the provider. And they're pretty expensive, so most companies just lease them. So continuing on, lastly, with T carriers are basically that speed is the reason that all these companies are going and do go to T, mainly T3 today, because of speed and also because of the same technology used on the internal LAN is used on your T carrier connection. So there's no differences as far as, there's nothing networking guys have to do to connect to it. They connect to the box on the outside of the building, and then it's connected right into your network. Better performance, faster performance, lower maintenance. If there is a problem, the networking folks do not touch it. You call your provider, they come and fix it because that's what you're paying for. It's expensive. And there is special training to work on these, both on the fiber side, both on the boxes, the CSU box or DSU box, either one. And what they do for IT folks is help you connect your routers and switches to those devices. So here's a screenshot of your cloud internet connected to a smart jack, we'll say on the wall of the building, going into your router CSU, DSU multiplexer connecting right into your data ports, your switches. And then the telephone switch would be what I drew up here with we have in here 3Com now, or sorry, Cisco, converting that signal into digital for those phones to use. It uses, again, over PSTN, advantages, much faster data. Types of DSL, you have what's called XDSL, refers to all DSL varieties, because there were so many, they just said XDSL. It's just X whatever. There's tons of them. In fact, there's more than what's listed here. Things you need to know about that is basically about DSL is asymmetrical and symmetrical. On DSL, by the way, the upstream and downstream are more static than on like a coaxial connection. A lot of companies that deal with web like DSL because of the upstream is much faster sometimes than your coaxial connections coming in. And so it's just by design, it's how they work. And so upstream and downstream are pretty much static. Not as fast. Downstream is definitely not as fast as coaxial and broadband, but upstream is definitely faster. On asymmetrical and symmetrical, asymmetrical means more throughput in one direction. Downstream throughput is higher than upstream. Best use for video conferencing, web surfing. Symmetrical would be web companies. Capacity for upstream and downstream. And examples of best use for this, uploading, downloading significant amount of data and fitting perfect for web media type of environments. Example of DSL as far as distance and feet with your WAN. Let's see, the VDSL, 1,000 to 4,500 feet. Then you have the SHDSL, 26,000 or 8,000 feet. So quite a bit of distance of limitations in between hops. Common example on a home computer is ADSL. And I'll go back to the slide here. 18,000 feet on a home residential area drop. And establish TCP connection, transmit through your DSL modem. Some of you might still have DSL. I've got it at the house. I've got AT&T DSL. It works perfect for us. Not as fast as Comcast on download, but I'm not paying for Comcast. It's internal or external. Splitters come in, can split the voice and data signals. You generally have to have a DSL, a filter to plug into your analog, so you won't have any. Now, we don't have a home phone, but if we did, you need a filter to plug in to where it will filter out the digital and not have the static. And this first bullet here on ADSL, which most homes have, it's over 4-pair UTP, distance less than 18,000 feet. Carrier's remote switching facility is where basically it comes from in that neighborhood. And this is what it looks like. So your switching facility is generally going to be looking like a box somewhere in your region, a big box, about double the size of the gray box there. They'll have all of the connections for your area to run. And then they've got splitters, usually in on the telephone pole around residential. If it's in apartments, on floor to floor, they got splitters. And then from the splitters, it goes into the actual home itself, usually in a basement, to connect somewhere in the for a DSL modem to be connected to. And then from there, you can connect to a computer, connect to your phone, whatever it is, just like you can for any broadband connection. DSL competition will be T1 ISDN and broadband installation. You do have monthly cost hardware, slightly less than ISDN, so you get significantly less than T1s. Drawback, throughput is much lower than broadband. Okay, throughput's much lower for broadband. Now let's get to broadband, where most of you have at home, and there are businesses getting into broadband, and we're going to end on broadband tonight with WAN connection. Cable companies, Comcast, Time Warner. In fact, I think they're merging now. Last I heard, Comcast bought out Time Warner. Is that right?
They've been trying to have mergers.
Did that go through?
A year. No,
It didn't go through.
No, it has not gone
Okay.
through yet. They're still trying to finalize it, FCC.
Right. 'Cause I heard last week the FCC was given the paperwork. And again,
Well, I don't know. There's still a lot of intricacy behind it.
Yeah.
They're trying to, both companies are trying to say, oh, we're not a monopoly, even though they're essentially
Oh,
a
yeah.
monopoly.
for sure. Yeah. Well, I'm kind of glad FCC is holding back on it. But anyway, cable companies connectivity option based on TV signals, coaxial cable wiring, theoretical transmission speeds, 150 megabits downstream, 10 megabits upstream, real transmission speed, about 10 megabits downstream, 2 megabits upstream, throttled, transmission limited, and a lot of areas, depending on where you live, will throttle your connection. They have mostly what's called shared physical connections throughout the environment. Best uses for web surfing, network data, and depending on where you live, it can be faster for sure. An example here of cable modem, Zoom I've not heard of, not ever used Zoom. Most ones around here is going to be either, your Motorola for the most part here in this area. What is it?
It's a
Lower. Okay, gotcha. And so, operates on the physical and data link layer, just like your NIC card does. Focus right on that same layer. Infrastructure required for broadband cable. HFC is one option. Hybrid fiber coax, expensive fiber optic link supporting high frequency, connects cable companies' offices to the node in your neighborhood. Cable drop's the other one. Connects node to customer business or residential, fiber optic or coaxial, and connects to head. That's generally the most common as a bottom one, the cable drop in the area. And generally those cable drops are in boxes on telephone poles. And you'll see your Comcast guy, or if they're doing a fresh install, it's never been done, you'll have to run a wire from the pole to your place of residence. And we've had over the years a number of Comcast people in this class that have filled me in on this information. And, it's surprising how many areas have not ever had cable, homes in Rockford and surrounding areas haven't had cable before, and they have to do brand new installations a lot of times, and not necessarily older neighborhoods. Sometimes it's newer neighborhoods that just never had it. And so it provides dedicated connection to the home. Many subscribers can share the same local line or same drop in the neighborhood. High throughput. So here's an example of a cable drop in a neighborhood there on the left. And all you need on the right is, depending on the size of the city, you could have multiple distribution hubs throughout the city, and then one central head end location throughout the city. And all your neighborhoods will have them. If anybody's ever had cable around your neighborhood, will have a box cable drop, again, tied to generally around a telephone pole in that area, whether it be in an alley, on the street. Broadband over power line. This is high-speed internet access over electrical grid. Began around 2000. Advantages, the potential for reaching remote users. Roadblocks, opposition from telecommunication groups, costly. Upgrade. Signals subject to more noise than DSL, as you can imagine. It's going over electrical. Signal interference with amateur radio. Now, let me talk about that for just a second. I think I might have mentioned here, I know I did when we were talking about networking in general, first few weeks. You can buy devices now, you have been for years, where you can plug in, it's two boxes you plug into your electrical ports in your house, and then you plug your Cat5 into those boxes, and then it can communicate over your electrical wires. Your Cat5 can. And most students don't know that. They're not that expensive, by the way, and you don't have to run wire. And it's basically doing coaxial over your electrical within your house, using your electrical wires within your house. And it works. I've done it in one area. I had a huge house when we first moved here. Did not run wire from the basement to the third level. And so I used this, picked it up, and it worked great. About a year and a half, worked really nice. I think they were $70 at that time for two units in a box, and took about 10, 15 minutes to set it up. pretty easy. And but anyway, roadblocks are there because of broadband over power line. This is a wider spectrum of what I talked about in the house. This is actually doing it over power lines on your telephone poles. Then you've got what's called ATM, asynchronous transfer mode on this, which is basically your data link layer. And on this one, you are functioning from node to node on an asynchronous mode in what's called fixed packets. And what it is you've got 48 data bytes per a 5-header packet. And all you need to know on this one is that asynchronous means it's continually moving the data in a very fast rate in asynchronous transfer mode. And let me end on this one here, this WAN technologies. Okay, so here is a overview of comparison of WAN and throughput. We'll start with dial-up, which some of you remember. How many remember the dial-up? 56K. Okay, that was fast back then. Like Bill Gates said years ago, whenever computers that like, I believe it was at that time, 2 megs of RAM, because this is the most memory a computer will ever need. 2 megs of RAM. That's it. That's all. This is it. This is tops. Well, we thought it was top 56K at one time, right? That was it. Actual limit 53 kilobits per second, so we launched 3. It was actually 53, not 56. Then it went from that to X25, which bumped it up to 64 kilobits or 2.048 megabits per second. Frame relay, 45 megabits. I want to skip to T1, 1.54 megabits. T3, 45 megabits. Broadband, theoretically, like I say, theoretically 56 megabits downstream, 10 megabits upstream. Actually, approximately 1.53 megabits upstream and 256 to 678 kilobits downstream. Power line, talk about that, up to 1 megabits per second. ATM, talk about that. And Sonnet, we did talk about, but that's fiber optic. The fiber optic, crazy throughput on that. 39,813 megabits per second in fiber. And that's a Sonnet connection. And so that's pretty crazy. All you ever need. That's as fast as it'll ever go. That's it. No more. Okay, I want to switch here now to your take home. And I'll just show it on the overhead if that's okay, and you guys can get together with your group in a second, but let me show you this, the sheet you'll be using at home. You're basically going to be going into your lab between now and, when did I say, 2 weeks from tonight, actually, right? Give you 2 weeks from tonight to get it done, whenever you want to do it. Just don't do it over break. Give you guys a break over break. Do I know?
2 or 3 weeks. I think it's 3.
No, I want 2 weeks from tonight when you're back for your. I want you to have it due. It's going to be due when you come back for your study night for your research paper. Yeah, that's what I want to do. So you still got 2 weeks, but don't do it next week, right? You can give yourself a little break. Maybe do it a week from Monday or something. But here we go. Your download TeamViewer, if you've never used it before, the link's there on step 1. Step 2 is you'll install it. Go through, accept all the defaults on the install. And this was the prior version, so these screens might look a little different maybe, but just accept all the defaults as you guys install it. Once you get through installing it, you can start it without installation on your machine, or I recommend going and install on your machine just to have it, okay? Install it fully on your machine is what I recommend, just so you could use it after the lab. But anyway, this is what it'll end up looking like roughly whenever you're done. You'll have an ID and a password field. And what you'll do is connect tonight before you leave. And we also set up on step 7 a date and time when you want to do it. And you can do this on a Mac or PC, either one. Decide who's going to be the expert in the group, in your group, the person remote controlling, and who's going to be the user being controlled. So to begin the session, you're going to have to follow steps 2 or 3 above, 2 to 6 above, and the user will tell the expert, call the expert, text the expert, email the expert, however you want to do it. You have to email them or text them or call them the ID and password. They have to have that information before they can remote into your machine. And by the way TeamViewer works, it's a one-time key. Once they do this session, they can't come back in and do it again when you don't know it. It's a one-time session. Okay, it creates a new key each time for that session. And so you'll have to email that person or text them. I'm guessing if you have text capabilities on your phone, it'll be easier to text everybody. If not, you can email each other. However you guys want to work out how to do that. But basically, the expert will type in the user ID and connect to the partner. It will prompt them to enter a password. Once they connect, the expert will start Notepad on the user's machine. If you're on a Mac you're remoting into, you can start TextPad. The expert will type into Notepad or TextPad their first and last name, save it to a desktop. The expert will also set the home page of the user to rockvalleycollege.edu. I want nobody setting users to porn sites. Make sure it's rockvalleycollege.edu. All right. And the session. Then both of you are going to send in a Dropbox for week 8, both the expert and user. Describe your experience, both from the user perspective and a person that remoted in, the expert, on how you could use this in the future. So what your experience was like, and hey, how could I use this in the future? And give me your little thoughts on that. Again, that's due 2 weeks from tonight. The same night you're going to be doing your research paper, beginning research on that and doing your outline. Questions on this? Yes.
What if your parents don't like the idea of a remote desktop?
What if your parents don't like the idea? You have a friend that you can go to? A friend's house?
Well, pretty much. I don't know how to explain it.
Because you can come to school, actually, if you do it on a Monday when we come back after spring break.
Okay.
You can actually be here on campus when they do it, if you want.
Okay.
Yeah, you can do it that way.
I'll do it that way.
Yeah, do it that way. Yeah, anybody else question on that? Yes.
I just have a question with the schedule. 'Cause you said 2 weeks, but I think you're not coming back here until the 26th, is that right?
No, but no, you are.
We're
You're,
not coming back next week, and then we're not coming back the week after
but it's
that.
still due. I want you to turn it in,
You want it due,
submitted
even though we're not-
2 weeks from tonight.
2 weeks
Right.
from- oh, I got it.
Yeah, 2 weeks from tonight. Yep. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, where you said send a Dropbox lab, you just mean where we like submit it to the lab?
Yeah, for week, it would actually be for week 8 lab.
Week 8.
Week 8 lab, correct.
Yeah, through Eagle?
Through Eagle, correct. Okay, so what you're gonna do now is before you leave, you're gonna look at somebody and go, oh yeah, you're my partner for this, right? And then you're gonna set up a time. You set up a time,
Just like
and then figure out how you're gonna communicate during that time to get the code back and forth to each other, right? The ID and password. Got it? All right, go forth and talk to each other, and then set up the time, and then have a great spring break. See you in 3 weeks.
Yeah.